Why, yes, as a matter of fact, there is a brand new addition to the wardrobe lineup. Thanks ever so much for noticing, and how fitting that it should arrive just in time for episode number 400. And thanks also once again to Vanessa and Ryan and the whole team at Men's League Sweaters in St. Joseph, Michigan for another job well done. And you know how you can tell when you're dealing with a quality organization? When you do business with a place and you go back a year later and do business with them again, and it's all the same people, and they know who you are, and they remember how you like things, and even in the cold, impersonal age of internet commerce, that still counts for something, in the opinion of this reporter. And if you would like one of these bad boys for yourself, then help get me to 10,000 subs, and I will open up the curmudgeon shop. That's Men's League Sweaters, St. Joseph, Michigan. They don't just do hockey jerseys either. They got hoodies, they got hats, tracksuits, flags, all manner of things. You need something customized? Go see these guys. Or go to the website, at any rate. It might be slightly creepy if you show up in person. So what's going on in the news? Well, the Republican primaries are over, for starters, which most people sort of knew already, but man, Donald Trump dropped the kind of ass-kicking that you just don't really ever see in the Iowa caucuses when there's a contested nomination at stake. If you've been paying attention to this stuff for any length of time, you don't need me to tell you that in years with a contested nomination, there's always a pretty even split in the Iowa caucuses. Oftentimes, some rather goofy candidates will wind up winning the thing or nearly winning it. Your Pat Robertsons, your Rick Santorums, your Michelle Bachmans, and so on. In 2016, not only did Trump not win Iowa, Ted Cruz won, but he very nearly finished in third. Freaking little Marco almost beat him out, and nobody finished over 30%. That's what always happens in the Iowa caucuses, but not this time. When one candidate gets over 50% in Iowa and he beats the second and third place finishers combined, your nominating contest is over. It just is. The other 49 primaries are a formality at this point. Trump should start focusing on the general election right freaking now. And the sausage factory of lies and malevolence that we used to call our news media, they continue to find new and inventive ways of making absolute fools of themselves. Because of course they do. Not only did none of them wait to call the election until after the polls had closed, they called the damn thing about 10 minutes after the voting had started. And I don't pretend to have a very detailed understanding of how the whole caucusing thing works, but I think it goes something like everybody goes down to their local precinct, and then brief statements are made on behalf of the various candidates by their designated surrogates, and then there's a brief period of public comments, and then the voting commences. So it's different from a normal election in the sense that in a normal election, people mostly already know how they're going to vote, and it's just a matter of going down to the polls and doing it. But with the caucus thing, there's an opportunity for people to say, you know, I'm still undecided at this point, but I'll go down there with an open mind, and I will allow myself to be persuaded. So it seems like a lot of the result in a system like that is down to the effectiveness of the surrogates that the campaigns send to the caucus sites, which could help explain why Iowa is always normally a very closely run thing, with the top three finishers usually within a few points of one another. But 50% and then some? That does not seem to evince a whole lot of indecision in the electorate. And that, of course, is the advantage that Trump has over any competitor, including and especially Joe Biden, because Trump's voters will crawl over broken glass naked in a blizzard to vote for him. Trump engenders a degree of loyalty and enthusiasm that are probably unprecedented in my lifetime. And there may not be a China virus this year, knock on wood, that enables the Democrats to change all the state voting laws to benefit themselves and call it public health. And bear in mind also, and Trump's campaign should really hammer away on this point, that a vote for Joe Biden in 2024 is a vote for Kamala Harris to be president of the United States. Because when you look at Biden's current condition, can you picture him staying in office? Hell, can you picture him remaining alive until January of 2029? I mean, as terrifying as it is living in a world where Joe Biden can launch nuclear weapons, I think we can all agree it's preferable to a world where the California cackler can launch nuclear weapons. Hit the music, Jim Eagle. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we didn't plan anything special for episode number 400, and it is all Jim Eagle's fault. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I'm your eponymous host and humble servant. And if we were to draw up a list of the most consequential figures of the 20th century, I think most historians would agree that Wilhelm II, Kaiser of the German Empire, King of Prussia, probably belongs in the top 5, at least insofar as a person's consequentiality is determined by how many millions of people perished and how many shock waves still reverberate down through history due to their blundering buffoonery. Now, why am I bringing up Kaiser Bill? Because I stumbled upon a movie last night that is all about a rather fascinating period at the very end of his life, and I think I wound up enjoying it rather a lot. The name of the picture is The Exception. The year of release was 2016. It was the directorial debut for David Laveau, screenplay by Simon Burke, based on an Alan Judd novel from 2003 titled The Kaiser's Last Kiss, and starring the incomparable Christopher Plummer in one of the most brilliant late-career performances I've seen from any actor ever. I would put it right up there, frankly, with Henry Fonda in On Golden Pond. That's how good Plummer is here. And it's a great example, I think, of the right way to do historical fiction. You're not so much using an historical setting as just a backdrop against which to tell your story, but you're taking a series of known facts and people and events and weaving your fictional narrative into it in such a way that contradicts the actual historical record as little as possible. And when you do depart from the historical record, it's done in a way that makes sense for the strengthening of the story that you are endeavoring to tell. Now, this story is set in Holland in the summer of 1940, where the deposed former Kaiser and king has been living in exile since abdicating his thrones at the end of the First World War in 1918, and for the first 20 years or so, it was a fairly agreeable arrangement for everyone, or at least as agreeable as life as a former king and emperor can be. I believe it was no less an authority than the Duke of Windsor, the former King Edward VIII, who once remarked that former king is the world's least common job title. But then 1933 rolls around and the National Socialists take power in Germany. Then we get to September of 1939, and now there's a Second World War on. As far as the Dutch are concerned, we remain neutral in the First War. We'll remain neutral in this war too. Everything will be fine. And then Hitler decides, nah, you know what? Nobody gets to be neutral anymore except freaking Switzerland. And on the 10th of May, 1940, in history's very first airborne invasion, the Germans dropped the hammer on Holland and Denmark and Belgium and, for good measure, freaking Luxembourg. And what the hell did Luxembourg ever do to anybody, for Christ's sake? And this is where the film's narrative begins. The former German Kaiser is now living in German-occupied territory, so his former subjects are now responsible for his physical security. And the Gestapo says there are rumors afoot that British intelligence wants to assassinate the old man. So a security detail is duly organized under the command of Captain Brandt, played by Courtney, who is one of my least favorite actors. But he doesn't bother me all that much in this picture, even though I had to see his cock. And I'm not talking about a split-second cock shot here. This is a good 3-second long cock shot, which is something close to an eternity, as cock shots go. But enough about that. And here we get our first couple of divergences from history and from the source material right at the outset. In the novel, the male lead, the Jai Courtney character, is an SS Obersturmbannführer. In the movie, they change him to being a captain in the Wehrmacht, which I think is probably the right move, because it's much less difficult to sympathize with an army officer than with an SS man. And obviously I would be remiss in not giving some sort of spoiler warning here, because I'm going to talk all about the plot and the big twist at the end. So if you want to watch the movie on its own terms without knowing what happens, do feel free to bail out of the video right now and come back after having watched it. It's on Amazon Prime, I think is where I caught it. The other major departure from history in the beginning is that the former Kaiser is depicted as holding out the hope of one day returning to Germany and reassuming both the imperial throne and the Prussian throne. But he never really thought that, because, come on, you can't unabdicate a crown. He did hold out hope, though, the fervent hope, that there would be a restoration of the monarchy, but it was his grandson that he envisaged taking the throne, since he and his eldest son had both renounced their right to the thrones intractably in the 1918 Instrument of Abdication. From the perspective of the SS and the Gestapo, they want to keep tabs on the former Kaiser. They want to find out who he's talking to back in Germany, what's being discussed, which they now have the opportunity to do since he is residing in German-occupied territory. So they placed a security detail in his household, ostensibly for the purpose of safeguarding his person, but really, they just want to spy on him. Hitler and Himmler are both very eager to root out any monarchists who might not be sufficiently loyal to the NSDAP, who might be plotting some sort of imperial restoration. Oh, but here's the thing. There really is a spy already in the household, a Dutch servant girl named Mika, played by the lovely and talented Lily James, who is more fun to look at naked than Jai Courtney is. And they don't beat around the bush. These two start screwing each other right out of the gate because, obviously, just like in real life, you meet a girl for the first time, you introduce yourselves, you order her to undress, and she duly strips down and bends over the nearest table. It's so very romantic. And the rest of the picture is spent on the burgeoning romance between the male and the female leads. By the third time they screw, he is wanting to run off and get married. Then she tells him she's Jewish. He thinks about it for a minute, decides he doesn't care, and we, the viewer, assume that the whole time that the crux of the story is going to be the female lead trying to assassinate the Kaiser and the male lead eventually discovering that she is the spy and deciding whether the power of boners is stronger than his sense of duty to Reich und Führer. But it's Christopher Plummer's performance that holds this whole thing together. Every moment he is on the screen is spellbinding. At the beginning of the picture, since he's one of the most recognizable actors of all time, you think, okay, sure, it's Christopher Plummer with a funny beard doing a German accent. But the great ones, man, they are great right up until the end. And by the time we get into the second act, Plummer has disappeared into Kaiser Wilhelm. It's the difference between playing a character and inhabiting a character. Christopher Plummer inhabits this character. It was one of his last performances, but for my money, it is as good as anything he ever did. Not to mention, it's a hell of a challenging role for an 86-year-old actor to be attempting in a picture with a first-time director. This dude was not just playing out the string and collecting paychecks and lifetime achievement awards. Oh no. This is a master craftsman at work who cares deeply about his trade and wants to show that he does. And the story is going just the way we expect it to at this point. Captain Brandt keeps noticing slightly suspicious things about Mika. He winds up following her home one night, and he sees her meeting with her British spy handler. So now the game's up, right? She's the spy. Her mission is to liquidate the Kaiser. But damn it, she is so hot, and I think I'm kind of in love with her. Boners or duty? Boners or duty? The question that has vexed many a man down through the ages. And then a bombshell drops. Would you believe that Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsfuhrer SS himself, wants to come over for dinner? And there can only be one reason for that. Clearly, he wants to extend an offer for the Kaiser to return home to Germany and reassume the throne. And here we have another divergence from the historical record, because in actuality, it was Hermann Goering who dropped in for dinner and not Himmler. But I think we can all agree with this change too, because you tell me who is more sinister and menacing. Hermann Goering, the jolly corpulent buffoon in his baby blue Luftwaffe uniform, or Heinrich freaking Himmler in his black leather trench coat? That is an easy one. Give me Himmler all day long. And that's exactly what winds up happening. Himmler asks to speak to the Kaiser privately, and he says, yes, the Fuhrer is extending to you an invitation to return to Berlin and reassume the throne and be a unifying figure for the nation. But it's all a bunch of bullshit. It's all part of the effort to identify and root out any monarchists back home so they can be duly shipped off to the concentration camp. And Himmler straight up tells this to Brandt and the Gestapo commander on his way out. He says, yeah, I just blew a bunch of smoke up the old man's ass, but I want you guys to keep track of who he talks to about this fake offer I just made. And Brandt, well, he's not quite sure how he feels about that, but then, he and Mika get busted in the act of riding the hobby horse together. They are brought before the Kaiser, and since they have both engaged in highly forbidden conduct, she expects to be dismissed from the household. He expects to be court-martialed. But then, quite unexpectedly, the Kaiser meets with the two of them in private and says, you know what? Fuck it. As a man who has sired more than his fair share of bastard children with various women over the years, I refuse to be a hypocrite. You can both stay, just don't get caught fucking again, and we're cool. Now, the magnanimity of the Kaiser causes Brandt's crisis of conscience to escalate and become even more severe, and he decides, I can't keep deceiving the old man when he has done me such a kindness as this. So he informs the Kaiser that Himmler's offer was pure bullshit, that the Nazis want no part of him, that there isn't going to be any restoration. They are just using you as an unwitting dupe for their domestic espionage operations. And in Plummer's performance, right at this moment, without any dialogue being spoken, you see the light going out of a man's eyes. You see a man who has kept himself going on a forlorn hope of the future, and now that future ceases to exist, and the hope ceases to exist, so now he's reduced to just sitting around waiting to die. The Kaiser doesn't take the news well, as you might expect. So he excuses himself to go and chop wood in the dark, as was his habit when he was upset. He's chopping away, and all of a sudden, shit, there's Mika standing there. She's followed him here to the woods to make an attempt on his life. He looks up at her quizzically, and she announces, Your Highness, I have a message for you from Winston Churchill. And there's nothing left for her to do at this point but pull out her pistol and take a shot. But then suddenly we cut away. And when we return back to the scene, the Kaiser is on the ground acting like he's having a heart attack, and Mika is rushing off to summon medical help. Well, this is strange. Why didn't she shoot him? What the hell's going on here? Is nothing real anymore? And here's the big twist. Mika is, in fact, a British spy, but she is not there to assassinate anybody. She really is carrying a message from Winston Churchill. It's an offer for the Kaiser to be smuggled out of Holland and to take up residence in Britain, and then, potentially, after the war, to have some role as a nominal head of state in whatever form post-war Germany takes. And that's a real offer that actually was made, but which the Kaiser rejected. So while we were cut away from the scene, the Kaiser decided that he needed to help Mika escape from the Gestapo. So he's pretending to have a heart attack so that Brandt can pretend to drive him to the hospital, and the two of them together can smuggle Mika out in the back of the van, which they do succeed in doing, but they do have to kill a couple of Gestapo guys on the way out, which is cool. They were just Gestapo guys. I like it when a movie comes up with a plot twist that I totally wasn't expecting. It happens so rarely, but this picture pulled it off. And that's what makes this film such an effective synergy of different idioms, where you start off with a strong novel, then you adapt it into a compelling screenplay, then you cast the right actors to play the roles, and you get the right director, and boom! All of a sudden you've got not just a good movie, but a fine piece of art. And God bless Christopher Plummer. That man was a Canadian national treasure, even though most people still think he was British, whose work will continue to enrich future generations as long as people watch movies. And I like this one a great deal, enough that I am willing to overlook the uncomfortably long, no pun intended, Jai Courtney cockshot. And that's really saying a lot. Thanks very much indeed for watching. See you next time. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.